It's August the 9th, 2022. I'm Dana Durnford at the Nuclear Proctologist.org. You can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's doing good. The show's an hour later than it normally is tonight. I didn't think I was going to be doing a show, but here we are, so let's do it. I'll talk about it after. And just bear with me. The crazy lunatic. What's wrong with these people? How come they can't be team players? Why you gotta be so difficult all the time? We got lots of news to get through tonight. The sadistic demons don't take any time off, so that's why we got a poll. Could less evil nuclear... and I'll explain why I framed that way in a second. Could less evil, because I know that don't sound normal, could less evil nuclear professors and subhuman scientists in the nuclear industry help us image? And there is no right or wrong answer. Right? Because that's just, you can fight about it all day long. And there's, ultimately, I suppose, right, there's nothing can help the nuclear image. But I'll explain why I framed that. Because I was looking at this when I was going to do the poll. And I was like, because I really despise that headline. Could less radiation in food make the public feel unsafe? This is how sadistic the industry actually... This is brainwashing. This is how brainwashing actually works. It doesn't affect you or me, but the average person who doesn't understand the minutiae of the industry are led to believe their whole life that radiation in food is good. And so it's not a play on words. It's a grammar attack. Could less radiation in food. Hence, the reason the poll says, could less evil nuclear professors and subhuman scientists, because you can't put all the words in there you want, your 100 letters, right? So it should read something like, could less evil, degenerate, scumbag nuclear professors and creepy, despicable, mass-murdering, subhuman nuclear scientists in the degenerate nuclear industry help its scumbag image? And again, there's no right or wrong answer, right? Because everybody is gonna have a valid point on why they voted any particular way in this one. So if the trolls are out there tonight, tough luck. You can go back and take the day off. Just want to reiterate how disgusting this story was from last night. This is a nuclear fuel facility. It's across from a high school. It's across from a high school. The nuclear industry can't help it. Don't blame the nuclear industry. They were born this way. They're just evil. It's nothing personal, I'm sure. It's just evil. We don't need a poll on that. Thank you very much. But I'll keep her rolling. The industry never stops. So we got the CAT scan today. Turned out, and so we didn't have no time. Just sit there and shut up. But so when they injected the dye into my left arm, they missed the vein, and my arm is still swelled up. I got more emotion. That's why we're doing the show tonight. I wasn't going to do tonight because this has been pretty miserable. Not pretty miserable, but actually miserable. And it's still swelled up. And so I'm very concerned about it. Obviously, they missed the vein, injected it into the muscle, I'm guessing. And I don't know how dangerous that is, but it hurt. It swelled up right away, and within 3 or 4 minutes, she had come out and put her both hands around the arm, and she said, "I don't like this." But anyway, so then they drilled another hole in my right arm. That didn't work. And then they drilled a hole in my right hand with the swelled up arm, and apparently one of them worked, but it took a long time. They kept me in the CAT scan the whole time. One of the nurses says, "We got to take him out." And the other two never said nothing, but they both looked at her. And then, because I couldn't see very good, right? But I did see them both look in her direction. They didn't say nothing. Then they kind of looked at each other, and then they went to work and tried to get the other two arms, right? Or the other arm and the wrist. But anyway, we got the scan, so I got an appointment tomorrow in the city. So I'll have an answer tomorrow of how bad this creature is. And this is a mobile CAT scan unit. They're nowhere near as good, apparently, according to them, which is the only actual conversation I had. They never asked me anything. It took a very long time on top of that when I finally got on the table. Disaster worse than Chernobyl and Fukushima. Likely. And I can't pronounce Ukrainian very good, so I'm not going to try. And this Ukrainian, the Europe's largest nuclear plant, Ukraine has warned. Ukraine hasn't... they're not supposed to be running reactors in a war zone. Did anybody mention that's a terrible idea to these people? As Russia is against... I gotta put that on the big screen. I can't see it. Yeah, as Russia again accused Ukraine of shelling the nuclear power plant. Well, Russia didn't shell themselves, did they? I don't know. Maybe they did. But I doubt it. It was my personal educated opinion on this. Concern grew for the safety of the complex, which has seen repeated shelling in recent days. Now, I won't put it past them and just to blame Ukraine if they're losing. And recent more shelling in that area. They knocked down high voltage power lines. An accident at the plant in Ukraine occupied would be far worse than Chernobyl or Fukushima. The Ukrainian ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency said in Vienna. That's a blatant, untrue assertion. First off, the reactors in Japan were multiple buildings had detonated. And by the way, the IAEA admitted back in 2011 there is no safe levels of man-made anthropogenic radiation. Not bananas or potato chips or anything like that, but actual man-made radiation. And allowable radiation standards are based on benefits, not safety. Which is homeostasis. There is no homeostasis in anthropogenic man-made radiation. And homeostasis means it's good for you. So terrorist bombs are not good for us. And so their safety is based, or their standards are based on natural, harmless, stupid, everyday. They're not really emitters. My apologies. You can't just run through this conversation. There's repercussions for this. You got to tell the story each time, unfortunately, right? So whenever you get into that, whenever you get into this, where you put yourself in a box, you got to flush out the rest of it. So if we... So what is the difference between man-made and anthropogenic radiation, Dana? Okay, so bananas don't do that, right? The natural stuff that you can dig up anywhere on the planet, it can't explode. No, if you put all kinds of bananas together, they're not going to blow up something, right? Okay, but when it comes to man-made radiation, you talk about it in actual physical atoms, because it's splitting, replicating. These are perpetual motion machines. That's what nuclear reactors are. And they create these atoms all day long, invisible snowstorms. And so a Curie is 37 billion atoms pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. Bananas don't have those attributes, right? So potassium is natural, potassium-40. And atomic decays, which is described as Curies, when a Curie is 37 billion atomic decays every second, and that could be for billions of years, is 0.000071. It's 71 10 millionth Curies per gram. Versus cesium, for instance, is 88 Curies, 88 times 37 billion atomic decays per second, for long past the human experience, per gram. And everything on the planet attacks it, tries to anyway, white blood cells, say, like insects and birds and animals, humans and mammals. But strontium-90 is 140 Curies per gram. It's like comparing a stick of dynamite, if you scaled everything up and finally got so much potassium that you were able to do something with it, which is absurd. You would, it'd be like comparing a stick of dynamite to a nuclear detonation, right? On a far-fetched solar system. So a gram, 104 Curies, gram basically, of cesium-137 can contaminate, a Central Park. And so Chernobyl has 104 Curies per square mile, and so it's a no-go zone. But in potassium, it would be completely... And it is, of course. Potassium's, you can't find anything on Earth that doesn't have potassium in it. You can't make a dirty bomb out of potassium or nuclear weapons out of potassium, right? So I apologize because we never got off track. Sometimes you got to talk about those nuances. So claiming that an accident in a Ukrainian nuclear plant in Russia is not going to be good. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be worse than Chernobyl. It ain't going to be worse, I don't think, in Fukushima, unless you have a catastrophic where you set everything off there. But let's just talk about how bad was Fukushima in order to do a comparison. Well, Fukushima had a tsunami run through the nuclear power plant. Some people claim there was maybe 2 feet of water run through the plant, but the evidence suggests it was a lot more than that. When the water receded, you had detonations. That's one reactor. It was 1 million sieverts outside of this reactor, for instance. And 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 10 sieverts is a lethal dose when you're walking towards it in this environment. And so 50 and 100 is a lethal dose trying to run past it. 1 million sieverts is you're dropping dead from a long distance away from the gamma shines, the X-rays, the neutron bursts. Unit 2 completely liquefied. And so you can't turn that clock back and pretend it didn't. And what you're talking about is well over 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. The fuel pool above it would have been liquefied. There was nothing to contain itself. The building was built. They're very robust buildings. So probably what happened with number 2, after it blew up and caught fire and burnt for several days straight, is the rest of it went China syndrome deep into the earth. Reactor 3 was a mixed oxide facility, a 40-year-old building. Now, both of those reactors had decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings. That's gone too. And the reactor cores were 720 tons versus Chernobyl was a 200-ton reactor. They're claiming that only 9 tons atomized and aerosoled. But even if it was 200 tons, this reactor was 720 tons. It was mixed oxide fuel, which is a billion times worse than a normal meltdown emitters. It was a highly lethal mixed oxide uranium fuel. When they burn like 200,000 degrees hotter than a normal, everyday, stupid, planet-killing nuclear meltdown. This, after they stripped it down with cranes and sacrificed an absurd amount of homeless people and destitute and victims of society, and the immigrants didn't speak the language, there was no longer a 190-foot building. The reactors and the fuel pools were at the top of a 190-foot building. Obviously, that's not a 190-foot building, but it went all over the world. This is just one of the many models. This one's Neptunium. And all this exercise might be good for my arm, but my arm is still, it's come down a bit, or I got more movement, I guess. But so over to your left is reactor 3. There is reactor 4. That's the back shot, and this is the front shot. That's as bad as it gets. There's nothing left. It's complete and utter destruction. Not maybe, not almost, but 100% unequivocal. And you know where all of the fuel went, of course, in those buildings was this model in your bottom right-hand corner is day 19. I'm pretty sure you live somewhere in the plume because it covers the whole planet in 19 days. They say that what will happen in a radius of 40 or 50 kilometers of the Ukraine plant is absolutely not comparable to Chernobyl, Fukushima. They're claiming it's worse. Well, first off, I just showed you it'd have to be pretty bad to be as bad as Chernobyl or Fukushima, or be as bad as any of the Fukushima reactors, which is, this model here is France's model of the fallout, and it was 100% accurate. It covers the whole planet in just 16 days. The plume didn't stop. That plume is there as you speak. It's from the upper troposphere to the bottom of the ocean. We have lost most of the species, particularly the Pacific. Now the Atlantic is brutalized. The birds, all the animals, mammals are showing up emaciated, if they show up at all. This is not something we have throughout history. According to the analysts, however, compared to the plants at Chernobyl, Fukushima, Europe's biggest plant is better protected. Yeah, it's not going to get hit by a tsunami, I don't think, is it? Thanks to the separate cooling, special protective layers, it'll probably be unable to withstand a military attack. So being better protected means nothing. They're firing missiles from it, from God, goodness sakes. He said, in the worst case, the catastrophic consequences are for all of Europe. They're trying to make this out that it's like, how bad was Chernobyl, for instance? Well, they closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom. So the radiation only seeks out farms, not your water, not your communities, not your children's playgrounds. No, only the farms, Dana. Which is why we have a poll tonight asking a simple question where there's no right answer. Could less evil nuclear professors and subhuman scientists in the nuclear industry help its image. I think the right answer is nothing can help its image. If you know the truth, right? Which obviously, because everybody got a very strong opinion about that one, I'm sure. When I posted, I was like, this is going to be a racket. Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming. The plume covers the whole planet pretty quickly. It never stops coming out. Eventually it covers the whole planet in about 40 days. Then you have a visible, permanent plume covering the entire planet, like an invisible snowstorm, except it's pulsing energy every second, actually physically heating up the planet. You got all the fuel pools worldwide releasing plumes all day long into the environment that cover the planet. There's over 1,000 fuel pools. And the reason I say this is because they're still splitting the atom, which is one of the reasons they're surrounded by farms. Try letting that sink in for a second. How sadistic that actually is. How rotten that is. That there's no one to protect you from it. There really isn't, right? There is no regulatory agencies. They've been captured, and then they were created as captured entities in the first place, right? To control opposition. Do you really think Spider-Man and the Hulk are real? They were created to brainwash you by the nuclear industry, to brainwash you, and each generation of your DNA was brainwashed by these entities through all the biggest mass screeching medias worldwide. I remember, a long time ago, must be 20 years ago, I decided I was going to get a TV and cable TV. So the big day came, and they came and hooked it up at my house. And everybody celebrated, and Dana's welcome to the flock. And so the next day, anyway, 9 a.m. when they opened, I called them, told them, come take it out of my house. And they said, no, you got a free month or something like that. And I'm like, no, come take it out of my house. And I just hung up, and I took it to the local place and tried to drop it off. They didn't want to take it. So finally they took it, and I left, and then the girl come running out of the building and said, Mr. Durnford, you still have free subscription that you can... I was like... I turned it on, and in the first hour, every 5-6 minutes, it was trying to sell me cars and everything else. And it was trying to sell me pharmaceutical drugs, claiming that I was psychotic because I went to bed at night and got up in the morning. So I got to get this drug, man. You need this drug. And within 1 hour, I almost broke the TV. And so I got rid of it, and I sold the TV. And life was normal again. Now back to reading books. It's a true story, 100% true story. It was the scariest experience imaginable, where this thing would scream at you, you gotta buy that right now. And that was just, wow. I can't even go into someone's house if their TV is on. It's bizarre, right? I can't stand it. But I was raised with no TV, I suppose. Said the U.S. would continue to closely monitor the activity as the nuclear power plant. The White House spokesperson said the U.S. You're going to get Ted Bundy to do it. I'm going to resurrect him and let him do it. The National Nuclear Security Administration. They give them these grand names. And if you meet them, you're like, that was a bunch of chicken eggs. A bunch of war hawks and chicken eggs. reported that the radiation sensors were continuing to provide data. It's amazing they can provide any data when Fukushima done that to the planet. How's that actually work, I wonder? The Pentagon announced further arms sales to Ukraine with $1 billion package, including additional ammunition for rocket launcher systems. Ammunition for rocket launcher systems. So rockets for the rocket launchers is what they're trying to say. But they want to play it down, so they're going to ammunition. Rocket launchers don't use ammunition. They use rockets. I know that might sound strange to some people, but and 1,000 Javelin anti-tank missiles. Man, all the NATO countries are shipping all their shoulder launch, pull and discharge. As soon as you shoot it, you just throw it away. Single shot, sometimes 6 or 7 missiles in a single shoulder launch rocket. Then you throw it away. So all the NATO countries are shipping in tens of thousands. Russia's getting picked off every time it lifts its head up. And so it's coward war. It's a coward war is what we're watching, right? They're giving the weapons to people that don't know what they're doing. Eventually they're going to figure it out. But Zelensky is just basically going to destroy the country and then surrender. First you got to destroy the country before you surrender. Or even worse. It also estimated up to 80,000 people were killed or injured on the Russian side. Instead of saying 80,000 commies were killed. Oh, how did we do last night? We got a hour and 52:33 last night. And what are we showing here tonight? I wonder. Drum roll, please. Tonight we got hour 52:46. Wow. 33 to 46. They added an extra 13 seconds. Yeah, they did so. Look at that. That was a big... Why did they add 13 seconds to my video? Now, it takes 12 hours for that to happen, right? Exactly 12 hours later. The comments will show up alongside the video, too, at that moment, 12 hours later. You wouldn't believe the ways they're censoring me. And I had... that was 10 hours later. I think I started off with 50 thumbs up. And currently I have 59 thumbs up. So I got 50 thumbs up in the first 2 hours. And then over the next 24 hours, I got 9 thumbs up or something. Welcome to Dana's World. Ukraine plant under fire showcases the dangerous nature of nuclear power. Experts say common dreams. Who's the experts? Having reactors in a war zone is a nightmare waiting to become a grim reality, said one critic. I hate it when they do that, eh? Everybody's a critic. Critics of atomic energy joined together with baseball bats to stop the nuclear industry one day. A warning that nuclear power plants are a liability, not an asset, especially under extreme conditions of war or climate change. We will not be having this conversation if we were dealing with solar panels and wind turbines, which is, I use that all the time. Advocates at Beyond Nuclear, which is a Helen Caldicott group. Helen wrote 14 anti-nuclear books, and she doesn't know reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools were destroyed on top of that. And she went out and done hundreds of interviews where she said they're not destroyed. It even just one of the 6 operational reactors that suffered catastrophic damages and releases in radioactive inventories, which is the fuel. We're talking about a humanitarian disaster with dwarf Chernobyl, Linda, and they got her middle name in there, look at that, and Gunter. It's Paul Gunter's first cousin. And so when they got married, they didn't have to change her last name. International specialist at Beyond Nuclear. According to Beyond Nuclear, which is beyond me why we're using these people, they got a horrific reputation. Ukraine's reactor contains far more radioactivity both in the reactors and the radiated fuel pools. It's got fuel pools there. That was present at the relatively new Chernobyl Unit 4. Well, Chernobyl Unit 4 didn't have any fuel pools. Last week, Sean Burney, which is Greenpeace's personal little puppet, told Democracy Never that nuclear plants are extremely vulnerable to external attacks in the context of the war zone. You're looking at a potential massive release of radioactivity, potentially greater than Chernobyl's. Well, Chernobyl was a 200-ton reactor. Just use the tonnage, Paul. Or Sean, Greenpeace. Something as simple as loss of power can unleash a massive releases of radioactivity worse than Chernobyl. Why are you talking about Chernobyl instead of Fukushima? Would be the appropriate one to talk about. Now, that's not something you hear him say very often. The loss of power could unleash a massive amount of radioactivity. When I say loss of power will cause the fuel pools to lose water because they're boiling off atoms into the environment all day, 120,000 liters a day. And then that could release it. But if you lose external power, you can't start up the generators, so you can't even start up, you can't keep the reactors that were running cool because you need 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons every single minute. In March, a tsunami earthquake, of course, you can't open them out without saying that, led to the loss of power in 3 reactor buildings. It was 4 numbnuts. Why did, that's the official story is 3 reactors, but the pictures show 4. It's disgusting. And so Beyond Nuclear refuses to acknowledge there's 4 reactors in Japan. And the 4th one was reactor 4. Because they're only acknowledging 1, 2, and 3 in that statement there. And they're not even talking like a person. As the fossil fuel-driven climate crisis supercharges storms. What a bizarre statement that is. That's desperation to blame it on fuel. The emissions from reactors or from coal, oil, and gas is carbon. And it can only travel maybe 50 miles on a typical day, 100 on a really, really windy day. And then it falls back down to the earth and plants start growing. Insects are able to reproduce because you got to have carbon. Without carbon, you can't have a single species on the planet. So the supercharged storms didn't exist pre-Fukushima because we don't have any building codes for storms at 200 miles per hour. None. Anywhere on the planet, for starters. So when you see stuff like this, you got to really remember what's going on here. You covered the planet in a plume that kills all the species that would typically everything sequesters carbon, right? The biggest sequester was supposed to be the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain, the stuff all the big whales that are showing up emaciated normally eat. They destroyed that, and you broke the food chain. And the trickle-down effect, you also destroyed most of the bacteria and the fungus. Plants can't grow, insects can't survive without fungus and bacteria. You also relate so much radiation, this invisible plume, you have this constant X-ray pulse going on. Nuclear infrastructure is increasingly vulnerable to damage of that sort. They are the reason for the supercell storms. Let's refresh your memories. We're going to just what the radioactive. See, gas, oil, and coal don't make emissions like you're looking at there. This emissions is from the reactors in Japan over 16 days, according to French government. So that's an invisible plume pulsing energy every second. So that's why, and that's still there now. You just can't see it or taste it or smell it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or whatever. But it's still there. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. The ocean, the rivers, the streams, the lakes, the estuaries, the glaciers are saturated. Your thyroid glands are saturated. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't have those attributes. So since Fukushima, we see supercell storms like we've never even heard tell of. We had seen depictions on the Discovery channels of those storms on Mars, but not on Earth. Paul Gunter, outrageous lawyer from Beyond Scumbag Nuclear. A fire could spread to the radiated fuel storage pools. If the fuel is uncovered, it'll start burning. That'll evaporate the rest of the water out of the fuel pool. All the fuel is the reactor cores. They'll go China syndrome. If they turn the water back on, it'll detonate. A fire at the pool could spread to be outside the primary containment and lead to explosions and meltdowns. Try not to be vague there, Paul. Once you admit that the fuel pools don't exist at Fukushima, because by saying what you're saying, you're claiming that the fuel pools at Fukushima didn't melt down. I disrespect you for doing that. If the fuel pools are damaged, cooling water boils away. Well, if you turn the water off, the water boils away. It loses 120,000 plus liters each day. Exposing the rods to the air, which are covered in zirconium, which is when it hits air, it ignites and burns at about 1600 degrees, which causes the pellets to also start burning. They burn at 9,000 Fahrenheit temperatures. And the spread of radioactivity far worse than occurred at Fukushima. Hey, did you know, Paul Gunter from Beyond Nuclear, that the fuel pools in Japan were melted down? Because you're claiming they're not. 40 years of fuel pools in 4 different buildings, plus the common spent fuel pool is also gone. Because when they released pictures last year in January that you never covered, and when you had to zoom in, because there were drone shots, high quality, thank goodness, 730, I've done a presentation on them during my playlist. Nobody's ever covered the pictures. And when you zoom in, all the reactors, including the fuel pool, behind number 4 and reactor number 6 also, were redacted in 730 plus pictures. Why would they do that? First off, the fuel pool is unequivocally gone in reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. In fact, there was 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings. They're both gone. They had decades of reactor cores stored in the stupidest place in human history, on top of a building, a nuclear reactor. Literally the stupidest thing imaginable. Unless you're planning on it happening. The claim that the radiation would be far worse than Fukushima. It's not the first time we've heard this from the Beyond Nuclear traders human trash. It's really despicable. But you got to articulate it and you got to show the evidence, which I have done repeatedly. So worst case was 250-kilometer exclusion zone, evacuation zone, if the fuel and spent fuel number 4 melted. Well, here's the reactor, the remains of reactor 4. That's where the fuel pools are at the very top of the building. There is no top to the building. There is no fuel pools. They're unequivocally gone. And so this deception that they're talking about meant that they were supposed to evacuate past Tokyo. Metropolitan Tokyo is 36 million people. But all the other prefectures, Chiba and everything else, should have been evacuated. Report hoax. Irresponsible rumors claim the spent fuel pool exploded. Gee, I don't know. Does it look like the fuel pool to your left is gone? This is Kevin Camp. Kevin Camp is from Beyond Nuclear. Listen to what Kevin Camp says about the fuel pool. He claims the fuel pools are not gone.
High-level radioactive waste storage pools, and incredibly, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the nuclear industry, has given short shrift to the safety risks of pools. So these are catastrophes waiting to happen. There's the slower motion boil-down scenario on the pools, but there's the fast motion drain-down scenario. And one instance of that we
Diablo
can point
Canyon.
to in the United States several times now over the decades is the near drop of heavy loads. And one of my favorites, because I'm from there, Southwest Michigan, is Palisades Atomic Reactor, October 2005, nearly dropped a load weighing 107 tons. It dangled over the pool for 2 days. They nearly overrode the emergency brake on the crane, which would have been catastrophic. You could drain these pools pretty much instantly. The waste would be on fire in a matter of hours, and the radioactivity releases would dwarf what we've seen at Fukushima Daiichi. There's no radiological containment around the pool.
Yeah, and Fukushima doesn't even have a pool. So here's Beyond Nuclear several years ago out there telling the same lie. And who's Beyond Nuclear? It's really something. Yeah, I gotta put him over in my list of scumbags. Hang on. It's a shocking revelation. And so Helen Caldicott started Beyond Nuclear, right? She also has 29,000 physicians for social responsibility. And people with good faith trusted her, but she's not somebody you should be trusting, unfortunately. Here was an interview, and she's done hundreds of these interviews, but somebody asked her, I put the pictures for you. She's in the top center. So the real reactor 4 is the one on the right. The fake one is the one on the left. Yeah, that's right. Real versus fake. Think about that.
Let me ask you this.
Now, she was asked, did the pool, reactor 4, look like the building to the left or the building to the right?
You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. I think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there. And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
So she's claiming it looks pristine. She's claiming it doesn't look like the building to the right. She's claiming that the fuel pools exist. And she started Beyond Nuclear, by the way. This was from 9 days after the nuclear meltdown. This was the Foreign Press Center. Just after this, they started doing these presentations were 7 days a week, went on for months, but they started doing it immediately after this at the Prime Minister's office. But this was day 9.
この原発の
I'll
問
do
題
the
は
translation for you.
1号機、2号機、3号機、4号機
So here's the translated part.
Currently, the nuclear power generation plant, including units 1, 2, 3, and 4, are showing signs of improvement. But we still face a situation of uncertainty. And I believe that we need to remain attentive and have to deal with care with each of the reactors and the spent fuel pools.
また大気中の
So the spent fuel pool. So this is what the building looked like when they were doing that interview. Yet they're claiming that everything is doing okay. There's the remains of reactor 4 to your left and reactor 3 to your right. So it's completely gone. It's completely gone. Not maybe, not perhaps, not almost, but it's completely gone. Yet there they were 9 days later lying to you. And so that's how Beyond Nuclear actually exists. Their job is to pretend they're anti-nuclear. They're just anti-you. They're anti-humans, anti-species. If the fuel pools, now we're back to Ukraine's nuclear power plant, are damaged, the cooling water boils away, exposing the highly radioactive waters to the air. You can see hydrogen explosions and the spread of radioactivity. The hydrogen explosion, the hydrogen is created by the meltdown. So if you have hydrogen, it's melted down, right? And again, claiming in another story, this is another story where they're claiming far worse than at Fukushima. It could be as bad as Fukushima. That's what you would say. But you wouldn't say far worse than Fukushima. And then the same thing, claim the fuel pools didn't melt down in Japan, right? So they're using the story to brainwash the population, to reinforce the deception and the deceit and the dishonesty. My arm is really... I'll keep hoping it's going to just start getting better, but I guess it's going to take a few days. Now, remember, right, I had a kidney stone, and we went and had a CAT scan. They done the same thing. They had no problems with my veins whatsoever, right? 0. But this time they had huge problems and left me in the CAT scan machine when they should have took me out, no doubt. If the fuel pools are damaged and cooling water boils away, exposing the highly radioactive rods to air, we could see hydrogen explosions and spread of radioactivity far worse than at Fukushima. On to the next story. No Nukes, which is the movie we were talking about last week. I think that's a reference to the movie they're using there, which was it was a concert just after 3 Mile Island. By the way, Santa Susana was equal to 460 3-mile islands melting down at the same time. They built 500,000 houses within 10 miles of it because they hit it. The group known for their opposition to Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant came out to downtown San Luis on August the 6th with signs encouraging a nuclear-free future. And so they've been an active group, this group down there, for a very long time. They connected with Mothers for Peace. And so, because Mothers for Peace is a good organization, Scumbag Nuclear created Mothers for Nuclear. And they're degenerates. They're degenerates. But Mothers for Peace are fine, right? They're great. And the nuclear industry had to come out and tarnish that. That's what they do, right? They can't do anything original in the nuclear industry. People are suffering all over Japan after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Many have suffered multiple cancers, disfigurements that have crossed over to the next generations. People don't understand how dangerous nuclear power plants are. They're vicious. Nuclear power plants are just perpetual misery machines, disease factories. Keep a creaking and dangerous nuke plant alive. Is P&G serious? The company wants to go back on their 2016 deal and operate Diablo Canyon long after it should have been shut down. 40 years ago, my friends and I were spending a large part of our lives trying to stop the nuclear power plants at Diablo Canyon. I couldn't imagine I would still be writing about this in 2022. And here we go. Diablo Canyon got its license despite the massive efforts of organized movements that changed many of our lives and have operated and generated high-level nuclear waste that has no place to go and has avoided a Fukushima-style disaster. Because Fukushima is by far the worst. Hopefully, we know about all of them. Now it's old and worn out and unsafe. PG&E, which was a corporate criminal then and still is now, wants to, because they killed a lot of people, this group, eh? They're serial killers, basically, beyond its projected usable life. Scumbag Diablo. The operations of Diablo Canyon discourages the use of renewables. They're a corporate felon responsible for over 100 dead, thousands of homes. It was like 27,000 homes and businesses burnt down. Hundreds of thousands of acres scorched. It can't be trusted. Well, I mean, that's the reality of it. The amount of lying this group does, this organization does, that's what it does all day. That's what these shows, which are basically presentations, are about, is to show you the daily verbal diarrhea from this industry. Diablo's once through cooling systems, think about that statement, is now illegal. How will that be rectified? Nuclear power is not clean or safe or efficient or too cheap to meet or anything else. Nuclear power creates around 12 million cubic feet of what they call low-level waste each year. Now, they have so many varieties of their so-called low-level waste because there's no one there to hold them accountable, right? Beyond nuclear is not going to be doing it. Their job is to fill the gap for responsibility with controlled opposition, right? 12 million a year is nothing to sneeze at. Think about 12 million one-ton pickup trucks of nuclear waste each year. Oh, we can fit all our nuclear waste on a football field, Dana. Fit all you nuclear scumbags in a big hole in the ground. Nuclear power is not efficient. It's the least efficient of all the energies on top of that. It's a disease factory. The cost of generating electricity at a new nuclear plant in the U.S. between $131 and $204 per megawatt hour. Solar and wind runs between $26 and $50 per megawatt hour. You can have it up and running in no time at all on top of that. And you can get insurance. Nuclear power is not safe. For proof, you should talk to the former residences of Chernobyl and Fukushima. But there's a simpler way. Try to find a private insurance company willing to insure a nuclear disease factory. And you won't be able to. Any accident could maim thousands, billions, create billions in property. Well, not could, will, and bankrupt the country, which of course it does. The feds have to provide insurance guarantees for a nuclear plant to exist. In other words, too evil to fail. Wind and solar developments of technology to store. If you develop technology to store energy for renewables, you've got your clean energy future. Well, if you got to, it should be geothermal and tidal zone. Geothermal, you can dig deep enough under any existing power plant and tap into it. If you wanted to, you can do it. There's supposed to be 1,000 tanks there. Of course, there was 1,000 tanks in 2013. We counted the tanks. There's 750 if you count the small ones. Japan plans to dump the radioactive wastewater. Well, first off, to claim that 11 years with multiple nuclear meltdowns and you got everything captured and it's in 1,000 tanks. It's not even a percent of a percent of a percent of the water that's gone through that place each year. You can fill up all the tanks 6 times a day if the reactors weren't melted down. To claim that 1,000 tanks is holding the highly radioactive waste, first off, you're talking 2.2 sieverts of just beta per liter. There's 1.4 million sieverts per tank. 3 to 4 sieverts is a lethal dose. The tanks ain't thick enough to shield you from this stuff. The tanks are 1.4 million sieverts of just beta. If you got to put in gammas, you got to put in neutrons, you got to put in beta. You can't just have gamma, for God's sakes, or beta or whatever. So you're talking several million sieverts per tank. Just try wrapping your mind around this. If you put this through a filter, the filter is going to aggregate huge amounts, but not nowhere near. It'll just be a fraction of each liter. But even then, you would, after a few minutes, not be able to get near the filter ever again. You can't get within 100 feet of it. So imagine 11 years later, the whole story is, the only reason it's not picked apart is because they control the universities and the media. They gobbled them up in increments over decades on purpose, and now they're at the lunatic threshold. Then you got the UN, which is 195 militaries, as George Bush calls them, the New World Order, taking over the sovereignty of every country, yet they don't have any jurisdiction over anybody's country. They can't arrest you, they can't jail you, they can't do anything to you. They're just a corporation like McDonald's. But because the militaries are involved, they cooperate, which is sedition. It's 100% criminal, and it's not tenable. You will lose the planet if you don't put an end to this military-industrial complex, also known as UN, and their little pet idiot machine known as NATO. So claiming that what Japan's gonna dump will endanger the lives of the people is to ignore what has happened. I just don't understand how we got to this stage. Well, I do, because I've been covering it every year, but the ocean is 100% annihilated. There's no way for it to recover. When you look at that's first off, that model I showed you was a 6-year model based on just tiny fractions of the actual numbers. The bottom corner by me is 19-day model of the radioactive fallout. So that's the whole planet covered in radioactive fallout in the first 16 days. The ocean can't escape that. Remember, Chernobyl, it closed, I showed you earlier, 9,000 farms, which meant you're supposed to abandon Europe, right? Not just United Kingdom, Ireland, and Scotland, where they closed 9,000 farms because of a meltdown 3,000 miles away in Ukraine. You can't contaminate 9,000 farms without contaminating all the fresh water, all the communities and buildings and infrastructure too. Many people in South Korea who are deceived and manipulated don't understand that the damage has already happened. So each of these stories are meant to reinforce the fable. They're extremely efficient at the brainwashing. I'll give them credit. Germany's energy policy is a non-nuclear meltdown. This is a pro-nuclear scumbag story, by the way. There's at least 5 to 10 articles every day since 2011 that attacks Germany for snubbing the nuke tard industry. House creates special panel on nuclear energy in the Philippines. The nuclear industry will put people in positions of power over decades if that's what it takes, and then the country will look at nuclear. If the country's anti-nuclear, the nuclear industry will try to fix that to their liking. They're very persistent, and they'll take the Manchurian candidates from their universities and ship them off to different countries, ultimately to change the policies. Shelling at Ukraine's nuke plant that's not supposed to be running in a war zone. It's just such a terrible idea to run nuclear power plants, because if you cut off the power source 50 miles away, the plant melts down. Fears over health and environmental threats. First off, you don't know if the truth will come out, whether they'll actually tell you if there's a release. Their legacy is not to tell you under any circumstances. If there's any way to lie, that's the preferred thing to do. So, again, they got the word UN. This is just a corporation that has no sovereignty over any country. That's legacy. If you want to know who UN is, go ask North Korea. If you want to know who Japan is, go ask North Korea. Because North Korea had captured Japan for 40 years. They were celebrating when Americans dropped the bomb, because North Korea felt they were going to be liberated, but a couple of years later, they went from Japan to North Korea. They used more bombs on North Korea than they used in the entire World War II, for God's sakes. They burnt down every community in North Korea with napalm on top of that. The UN is not your friend, or anybody's friend, even their own. UN is an abomination. It's a plague. It's the actual plague on our planet. It's actually got a name. It's called UN. Anti-aircraft defenses around nuclear power plants. It's not the first time we heard that, of course, over the years, but we'll be straightened following days of reported shelling at the site, which is by Ukraine. Who really think Russia's going to shoot at themselves? That's the nuclear industry for you doing that, putting that narrative out there. Why is there more media talk about using nuclear weapons than about banning them? U.S. newspapers mention nuclear weapons 5,243 times between February and now. Only 43 of those times included a mention of a treaty. And the great majority of those letters were letters to the editor or opinion columns of the 43. Keep you in fear, right? That's incredible brainwashing. It's brainwashing everybody. Unfortunately, it's not only in America. Like, you got to be out there doing the same thing with zero nuclear power plants. Because they're hemorrhaging radiation into your environment 24 hours a day from the fuel pools. We have to stop that. We can't have any species in the future as long as they're doing that to us, to the planet. This is about the planet. This is about 8 million species. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about the planet, right? This is our watch. This is our responsibility. We're obligated. This is our obligation under the Constitutions, Magna Cartas, Bill of Rights, any charters. We are obligated to be the checks and balances. Because first off, we know for a fact now the system is completely corrupt. It's completely corrupt. And if there's no incentive not to be evil, then they'll take the evil route each time, right? Deep isolation. And Amentum, is that how you pronounce that stupid name? Form a partnership to commercialize nuclear waste holes in the ground. This is one of the biggest scams in human history, this Ponzi scam right here, this company. Deep isolation is a company, and so is that stupid other name. Berkeley, California. It's a father and daughter. When they're not having sex or trying to poison the planet. Then a memorandum of understanding. Well, they found their little niche to make a bunch of money, and all you got to do is poison the planet, keep the lie alive, fill people full of nonsense. Initial targets for joint work include countries in Europe and the Pacific. Initial targets. Why ain't you targeting your own country first? Whenever they're going to target another country, they ain't going to be doing their job. This is like when you look at what Safecast done to Japan. Man, evil. That's evil on a whole different level, man. Now they're gone in the air monitoring machines worldwide. They're gone worldwide evil. And they got the backers to do it too on top of that. They're disgusting. Like you look at like Asby Brown with Safecast. Man, evil. Ted Bundy looks like a schoolyard tantrum. His unparalleled engineering expertise. The hell are you talking about? You don't have a cheap geological repository anywhere on the planet. Like, they dress themselves up. They tell lies to make themselves feel normal. Because I'm sure when they look in the mirror, they don't see themselves as good people. How can you, right? Advanced technology successfully clean up highly complex nuclear sites. I mean, Chris Singh from Holtec, he's the president, secretary, the treasurer, and everything. And he gets some of the biggest contracts on the planet, right? He's not an American. He doesn't care about America. He doesn't care about the fresh water. Doesn't care about the children. When you hear the word low carbon nuclear energy, you're talking to a zombie. That's a zombie. There's zero possibilities of having a conversation with those types of people. There's no solutions comes from these types of people, okay? When they mention zero carbon nuclear and fight against climate change, you're going to get the knife in the back the minute you turn your back. And your children. Low carbon nuclear energy is a powerful alternative to fossil fuel in the fight against climate change, which is caused by nuclear. That's what climate change is, right? It's radioactive fallout covering the entire planet from the surface to the ocean floor, pulsing energy every second. That's climate change. Terrorist. Fukushima radioactive fallout is global warming. Coal, oil, and gas emissions don't cover the planet in plumes, okay? If your coal plant breaks down, it doesn't make a plume covering your planet, all right? If your gas plant breaks down, it's not going to be plumes covering your planet, pulsing energy every second, almost at the speed of light for millions of years. Okay? All right? Okay? I'm only telling you 500 more times. Much of the world is requiring a waste solution to be in place before investments are made in nuclear power plants, aka disease factories. So part of the green economics, the taxonomy, everything else is you got to have a plan to get rid of nuclear waste. We don't care what you do with it. You put it in smoke detectors and stick it in people's houses. We don't care. Just get rid of it. Can you imagine how much americium-241 they got rid of in smoke detectors? In 1 billion smoke detectors. Oh, they only put a little piece in it. Yeah, the pulsing energy at the speed of light. Like, it's absurd to suggest it's just americium. Deep isolations. Yeah, we've covered him so many times. It's a Ponzi scam. We're gonna do yoga. I almost vomited it when I seen that picture right there. And I did vomit when I see that one for sure. We got Richard and Bitchert, a.k.a. Elizabeth. And Rod, the serial killer. And Bill, the Spider-Man and the Hulk there. They got a big crew. Because that's what you need, right, to get the big government contracts. Their job is to convince everybody that they're almost human. They have some kind of human attributes. Special mentions. You who run the world. The world is changing fast. It is imperative for the success of nuclear energy. For the success, after 80 years, they're still looking for the success. We solved the nuclear waste challenge, deep isolation, CEO, who actually, she created it. It's her baby. It's her little, like Chris Singh, it's her little contribution to the nuclear industry to help them survive. Deep isolation details and compliant process based on the gobbleish, demonic, sadistic IAEA guidance, whose standards are based on safety, not on actual man-made radiation. So it doesn't matter how much it releases because there's no crime committed. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress and parliaments worldwide don't have the authority to make it actually illegal to poison you with radiation. Hence the reason they stick chemotherapy in so many of you just before you die. But they got to get rid of nuclear waste some way, Dana. For tailing a deep borehole. They got a million fancy names, but they're going to drill a hole in the ground. Deep geological repository, Dana. No. It's a hole in the ground. You're going to lower the cast down the hole, fill it in. Call it what it is. A bullshit story. Painted up with all kinds of fancy words. Oh, it's a public-facing company. So they got to come out and say these things, right? That's part of the shareholders. You got to build up the reputation of your scumbag company. Don't be ashamed of being a scumbag. Rejoice in it. Speaking of scumbags, Chris Singh's Holtec Pilgrim plant discharge. So they say, well, if we can't dump it in the ocean, we should boil it off into the environment. Like dirty bombs all day long. Let's boil off the nuclear waste into your community. Savages, eh? It's cool to be kind. If you sent that shirts with those words on to the nuclear power plants, the pro-nuclear would wipe their asses with it until it was all gone. Or they probably package it up and ship it back to you after. Our bay is not Pilgrim's dump. Go after Chris Singh. He's the president, the secretary, the treasurer, the janitor. He's everything. He does it all. He answers the phone. So they had a good protest. Bless their hearts. Bring baseball bats, not signs. State Senator further legislative efforts are to delay, if not outright prevent, the 1 million gallons of... Now they're calling, because this word wastewater came out of Fukushima. Now all nuclear press releases are calling their nuclear radioactive water wastewater. Because that's true 100%, right? If successful, the measure would lead to the creation of a special commission to study economics, environmental impacts of the discharge of the spent fuel pools. Well, Dana, what the fuck is excuse the language, but what the fuck is a spent fuel pool water? Oh, gee, why didn't you ask that earlier? It's the fuel rods that would normally split the atoms to boil water for 1 million homes each day are still splitting the atom, but they're not contained no more. And so the water soaks up per liter billions and trillions of atoms. That boils off up the tall, skinny chimneys, where it lands in all the farmer fields, the heavy stuff, and then the rest of it floats into your communities and your drinking water. It's a perpetual, disgusting disease factory. And that's what a spent fuel pool is. Hang on, I'll show you. This is not... I can show you things too, you know. Yeah, let's just work Dana to death all the time. He doesn't care. No. Well, if I don't show you, how can I help you appreciate? So the reactors are hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pool, which means that all the reactors that are surrounded by farms, which coincidentally happens to be almost all of them. So that food sucks up a lot of radiation close by, so they keep the numbers low around the plant. So when you ship the food off to your supermarkets, it's nothing personal. They just want to get the numbers down around their reactors. So they build them in farmland. This one is France? Or is this Germany? I can't remember. Yeah, I think this is France's. You can see the reactor way in the distance. It's surrounded as far as you... That's the typical nuclear power plant. They look for that kind of terrain, and they want to build their nuclear plant there, because the radioactive fallout is so much all the time, and they're shipping the food out to markets. So you poison a lot more people that way. 'Cause that's what they're doing, right? Nothing else would make sense. It's not an accident that almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. That's not an accident. Is it? You think it's an accident 450 nuclear power plants, the majority of them are surrounded by farms? And I mean by 98% when I say majority. Holtec faces mounting pressure to find an alternative to discharging the water from the nuclear wastelands fuel pools and other areas after first announcing plans to release it past November. Because they do it all the time when they're doing the so-called decommissioning. It costs money to store it, Dina. Yeah, I know. It's illegal to dump sewage into your community's oceans if you live on the ocean, but it's not for the nuclear industry to dump lethal nuclear waste all day, every day into your oceans. Holtec commits to not discharging it until the third-party testing gives okay. Which is probably beyond nuclear, right? Oh, yeah, we'll get third-party testing. How about that? Hey, Arnie Gunnarsson, you got time? No, go ask Helen Kellicott's group, Beyond Nuclear. They're probably not that busy today. I'm busy screwing over somebody else today. I can't come. The duty falls to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission because the IAEA does not have oversight of radioactive materials. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA rather, does not have oversight of the radioactive material. And Congress doesn't have the authority to make it illegal to poison. You just shut up. And if not shut up, we'll just cover it up. It has refuted Holtec's claim that it was authorized to release any water on or both its... It was, right? The National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. National Pollutant Discharge System. Permits and the settlement, which is a big rubber stamp, right? The settlement agreement it reached with the state prior to the beginning the decommissioning of the plant. The water would be treated, and this is the new one, by the way. The last couple of years we hear this quite a bit. The water would be treated and released in batches over time. You can't destroy radiation. If you release it, it's not diluted. It's spread out over everything. Critics contend nuclear elements, particularly tritium, tritium's really bad, by the way. But that's the last thing you're worried about in this water. The water is still splitting the atom. The fuel is still splitting the atom. The fuel pools are insidiously radioactive materials, which cannot be filtered out with see, the minute you brought up the word tritium, because we hear that constantly, right? That's the look over here. For God's sakes, don't look over there. Would bioaccumulate in the water potentially unhealthy levels. The minute you hear the word tritium, that's them kicking you in the guts and running away. The commission would be required to complete a report of their findings, recommendations, and hold at least 4 public hearings before they can finally release it into the ocean. And it doesn't matter what you say they're going to release it, but you can have your little hearings if you like. Nuclear decommissioned citizens advisory panels, which are typically seated with the industry, unfortunately. Other options exist for the company, although Holtec says those other alternatives, such as evaporation or trucking the water to another state, would cost money. Well, yeah, of course it would. That's part of the decommissioning, scumbag, such as evaporation. So evaporation is where you just boil it off into the community. What it costs is fuel to do it, Dana. That's money. That's profit. Their job is not to do anything that cuts into profit. In fact, you'll be terrified if you knew how much they recycle in the children's toys from nuclear sites, or in the frying pans for your kitchen, or bumpers on your cars. It's disgusting. The fourth option, storing the water indefinitely at the site, would delay the decommissioning process. Why store it definitely at the site? Well, because now you're talking about buying property and storing it indefinitely. There is no profit when you start doing that, right? If you got to store it, there's no profit because it costs huge money every year, and there goes your profit. Somebody has to pay for it. And they're not doing it. Chris Sins, which is Holtec, he can't make a profit if he does it safely. And he makes profit, baby. He has more cars than Jay Leno. Moran has previously introduced a bill to prevent any discharge into the state's waterway. You got to have one there so you can't boil it off too right away. So I don't think my arm is going to get better anytime soon. They injected that shit right into my muscles. Nagasaki marks a bombing anniversary amid nuclear warfare. I don't know why they got that particular statue, because that's not a Japanese person. pay tribute to the victims, which is today is the Nagasaki anniversary. I'm probably going to do a show on Monday, next Monday, for Nagasaki. We already done one show on Nagasaki, Hiroshima, but I want to do another show because I got so much there. It'll take about 4 shows to do all of it. I got 1,400 picked out. I'll never get through it, right? Yeah, and so this threat of nuclear war shows you that nuclear is an idiot machine. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, threat of nuclear weapons use came only a month after it and 4 other nuclear powers pledged in a statement that nuclear war should never be fought. And shows the world the use of nuclear weapons is not a groundless fear, but a tangible and a present crisis. And the belief that nuclear weapons can be processed not for actual use but for deterrence is a fantasy, nothing more than hope. So Japan renounces its own possessions, productions, and hosting of nuclear weapons, but as a U.S. ally, Japan hosts 50,000 serial killers, aka American troops, and is protected by the U.S. nuclear umbrella. So you got 2 hands, both of them are dirty. American and British nuclear experts that never went to Fukushima conduct counter-proliferation exercises in the United Kingdom. Go do it at Fukushima, nuclear meltdown. Shows you got some balls. I guess that's a radiation detecting device they got there. Or is it camera? I'm not sure. Who knows with these people? It's Sellafield, England. Sellafield, England, which is got a meltdown going on there as we speak. Since 1957, there's 8 million liters a day hemorrhaging into the Atlantic Ocean. And, of course, Sellafield is surrounded by farms. And they poisoned the Arctic with their reprocessing facility. The exercise, first of its time, was the first time one of the U.S. Army nuclear disablement teams have trained in the United Kingdom in a nuclear wasteland. And this was back in May. We're only hearing about it today. In addition to the NDT-1, the Manhattan, the Mad Hatter, more like it, the NDT team number 2 was called Iron Maiden. And the 3rd team was called Vandals. Vandals, Iron Maiden, Manhattan. You guys are a bunch of idiots, is more like it. The Aberdeen Proving Ground. I guess these glove boxes they're using there. These are training boxes, I think, because they got probably one of the worst collections of nuclear waste on the planet, and they dumped it in the Atlantic Ocean for over 30 years from ships before it became illegal. Just driving around, throwing it off to ships. Says there are currently no commercial reprocessing facilities for nuclear fuel operating in the United Kingdoms because they shut down Donna, right? They just shut down Sellafield. Conducting training at Sellafield exposed team members to a portion of the nuclear fuel cycle they really have the opportunity to work in and at a scale that nobody's witnessed before. I think these people are lunatics. It was the first of the Sellafield site new glove box training facility right here. Again, we see Australia, the nuclear industry in Australia, because it's illegal to have reactors in Australia, but the nuclear industry that is in Australia and the Mineral Council of Australia, which is extremely powerful, we've covered them many times, right? And when I mean powerful, political. And the political house love these people. prices are soaring, but this was artificially inflated. So they have this cycle where they artificially inflate the price of uranium. They convince, like the Globe and Mail and BBC and the rest of them, will convince investors to invest in uranium. 2 weeks later, the bottom falls out. So they've been doing this for 11 years straight. This cycle, over and over and over and over, robbing people of their life savings. It's truly despicable. They even claim France is planning new reactors to begin replacing its aging and troublesome fleet of 56 reactors. France can't even build reactors in the United Kingdom. And Finland was billions and billions and billions over budget and a decade behind. And they have to redesign those reactors before they can build any new ones because they had so many problems with that new design, right? And in France, of course, their reactors were all built at the same time in the 70s, and now they're all breaking down at the same time. Why did France wait until it was too late to announce they're going to build reactors when it takes forever to build reactors? And they don't have that manpower, right? They don't have that. Like, you're talking a lot of reactors. They don't have, because you need a lot of natural resources, the best of the best only. Last year they had 6,000 tons of uranium in Australia. And they call it zero emissions fuel. Like when they call, anybody in the nuclear industry calls nuclear carbon free, this is an agenda. There's no actual facts to support that, of course, right? It's about brainwashing. And so they're all over it. They're game on for that stuff. So West grapples with the health effect of nuclear ore mining. This was a video. Basically, all the tailing mines and everything have polluted the whole area for decades and decades and decades. And then the companies that done it walked away. As she's pointing out all kinds of cancer clusters all around this place. They've done a lot of research. And she got everything color-coded. And so yellow is cancer deaths, green is cancer, blue is breast cancer, thyroids, and skin cancers. And you kind of got to watch it, right, to get the whole logistics. But it's huge cancer clusters everywhere because of all the uranium waste and mining and chemicals and everything else. Just this whole despicable history. That's one of the tailing. There's nothing on the bottom, nothing to stop it from washing or down in rain or blowing in drought, right? Have a nice day, Andy. It's into the water tables. They got 523 abandoned mines in this area. It's actually 15,000 recorded, right? Father Carl Cabot, a former Baltimore resident, spent 17 years in prison for anti-nuclear protests. He died today. But anybody that spent 17 years in prison and is not deterred, my hat's off to him. He lost his eyesight in prison from some surgery or something. 4 decades, he was the first plowshares action to symbolically dismantle a nuclear warhead. And he passed at the age of 88. And he was hardcore to the end. So we love stories like that. Nuclear-free Mongolia, symbol of peace in a troubled world, says United Nations. It's absurd. They're such degenerates. United Nations, man. There's scumbags, and then there's United Nations. A UFO buzzed a U.S. nuclear bomber at around 3,900 miles per hour in the 50s. It was seen on the ground, it was seen in the people on the planes, and it was seen on radars. So if it's true, it's an amazing story. That'd be an amazing story if that's true. But it's from the media, and even worse, it's from the sun. It hit speeds which beyond any known aircraft was detected on the aircraft radar scopes. It was detected, seen from the ground. A Salo contracted to support new Sellafield facility. We talked about them already last week, right? And it's Nuclear Engineering International, and everybody knows, anybody who watches this show knows how much I despise Nuclear Engineering International. They're way at the bottom of the nuclear food chain. They're at the top of it in one sense because it's Nuclear Engineering International. They have a lot of weight, right? But in moral compass, they're at the very bottom of they're down there with the slugs. And what they're going to do, claiming, right, that company has filters to filter the nuclear water, and there's a stupid amount they need. Like the water in nuclear sites and nuclear power plants, it's shocking how much water they go through each day that's dirty, contaminated. It's shocking, folks. So they got this company, and the company claims it's going to filter the water as it's going into the ocean. It doesn't work that way, folks. It can't be done. If the water's radioactive, the water's radioactive. You can't unradioactive the water. You can't get the elements out. Some of it, you can do it. You can do that with paper towels. You still can't get rid of the radiation, though. Campaigners launch a legal challenge against Sizewell C, surrounded by farms. Why be so evil? And this is what I mean, right? This is why we got a poll that there's no right or wrong in the poll. By the way, you can vote whatever you want. Could less evil nuclear professors... Now, I put the reason I used that grammar, I used it for a specific reason. Could less evil nuclear professors, because you can't get a non-evil nuclear professor, so if he's less evil than most nuclear professors, and the subhuman scientists in the nuclear industry help his image. I agree, you can't. How can you help the nuclear industry image? It's a trick question. There's no right or wrong answer, ultimately. Because you can just generalize it, see? I apologize. Together Against Sizewell C Limited, TASC. And so we appreciate them, that they're down there and they're working very hard to curb stomp the nuclear industry. And it warms my heart, absolutely warms my heart, that they're going to legally challenge. And they can't, because Sizewell C doesn't have water. It's in a water crisis area. And it's surrounded by farms. It's just like building nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. If that don't scream evil, you need to reassess your versions of evil. All right, looks like we made it. Give us a thumbs up if you made it this far into the video. I'm off to the city tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'll be streaming tomorrow night. I think everybody can predict me pretty good. If I can stream, I will stream, right? And I got to take the slow way because I got a bad control arm that hasn't showed up yet. And because you can have an accident, right? And so if you're going at high speeds, I'm not going to be going at high speeds. So I got to take the long, slow way to the city. You be careful going through the city. I got to get in to see the doctor to get the results from today. And so if I get a bad result, I don't know how my emotions are going to handle that tomorrow night. So I might not do a stream if I'm not. I might not. The time I gets in there and gets back out again, I'm going to be burnt out anyway, right? Because my arm is. They jabbed me 3 times today, and when they jabbed that arm, they stuck the dye into my muscle. I'm assuming that's why my arm is screwed up. And they knew they screwed it up too. You can tell by their reaction. They were grabbing my arm. They're like, "Oh, I don't like this." I was like, "Let's get this over with." Because my doctor's going on vacation on Thursday, so I got the last possible, thanks to the receptionist in there, right? And we'll find out tomorrow, I guess, anyway. It's going to be what it's going to be. We've been hitting the DCA, but only for like 6 weeks. You got to be doing it for at least 3 months. But we do know it reduces the majority of tumors by 70% in the first 3 weeks. And I was taking the appropriate doses per kilogram. I was using pure uranium. Pure DCA. Don't use uranium, folks. We're using pure DCA. We're backing up with vitamin B1, lots of vitamin C, up to 2,500 milligrams. Potassium, magnesium, all the good stuff. I was doing 25 milligrams a kilogram, right? I started at 10 and worked my way up. So we got a lot on our plates this week and next week. And I'm trying my best to get out and do some research. I don't know how to give up, right? I'm very, very bad at giving up. So Jim W. donated $50 last night. Jim, thank you. We got that. James Lewis donated 250 Canadian. Huge donation. That's a big deal because we got to get a bunch of fuel for the boat. We got to get the control arm put on the truck. And we got to obviously get an alignment when you do that. I'm going to try to install it myself, but if you go look at the videos of putting control arm in my truck, it's not actually easy. And I watched a few videos, so I'll watch them again. Tomorrow's going to chew up about 125 on me. And I'm super happy that we got those donations last night. That's a big deal. That actually instantly took a huge amount of pressure off me. Because I'm like, we're struggling to keep this operation moving forward. I'll most likely be back tomorrow night. Once again, the poll doesn't matter yes or no, per se. It's not, because it's a difficult question, right? But let's end the poll, and we'll do a quick shout out to everybody. Could less evil nuclear professors, subhuman scientists in the nuclear industry help its image? Well, it's kind of a spin-off of the poll last night where we said, should the nuclear industry fire the millions of scumbags and hire smart people, right? So tonight's poll is a compliment to that. Just before I let that go, because typically my polls are trying to bring a certain point to the table, but every once in a while I'll use the pole to lash out at the degenerate, cowardly scumbag nuclear industry. I did talk to Stephen Young today, so that was pretty awesome. Cody, good night, everybody. Don Vincent, Peaceware, Albert. Hi, Albert. Because our show started an hour later than normal. Onion Breath. And so we're not on a normal schedule we do our shows on. Richard, good night, everybody. James Lucid, thank you again, James. Double-breasted paper suits. Yeah, I mean, really, why doesn't the nuclear industry come up with a real suit instead of paper suits? I mean, such an important question, say. Blue Jay Outpost. Let me keep just quick shooter for everybody. Just zipping up to the comment sections. It's a habit at this stage, obviously. A good habit. I always read the comments after. Back in the originally, I used to get 300 to 400 comments before the show starts. It was mostly the nuclear industry being scumbags, and the good people are trying to argue with them. But eventually, we learned how to beat the industry up really good. Dana Nasana, thank you. Good night. Because we started late, right, than normal. James Megan, another Gmail. Angel's Place. Good night, everybody. I'm just almost up through the names here. John Shiflett. Hi, John. Yeah, so we got quite a bit of stress off my shoulder between last night and today. That's a big deal. Tomorrow, I'm still stressed about tomorrow. I'll deal with it. Whatever it is, I'll deal with it. I can't change what I can't change. I'm trying my best. Michael, Ruse, thank you. We're almost finished here. I gotta get up early to Ayers. I got a long day, super long day tomorrow. Thinker, Sean O. Oh, there you go. I think we're through the top part. Come down to the most recent comments. Thank you, everybody. There was no way I could start the show on time tonight, so I didn't try to, right? Okay, looks good. What do we got done here? Do we... hour and 47. Which puts me up at 1 o'clock my time, almost. 1 a.m. Yeah, it's 12 minutes to 1 a.m. my time. Nice and quiet out in my neighborhood at this hour at night. That's why I do my shows late at night my time. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Possibility. You'll have to check and see if I have a preamble posted, is all I can say. I got no idea till tomorrow night comes, right? Most likely with me, I'll be doing the show tomorrow night. Tomorrow's Wednesday. If I get bad news, though, I probably won't. We'll see everybody on the next show. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. Thank you to those who were able to donate. It means a lot. It will make a huge difference. We'll fuel up the boat on Friday. I got to get the... I can't move the boat until I change the control arm, right? Because you'll be lifting up the front, and that's asking for a beating. So there's no sense doing that. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody soon. Take care, folks.